Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to show you and give my impressions of the Nars Sarah Moon collection piece that I bought, which was the palette which is called Give and Take and is a dual intensity eye and cheek palette. Now, I haven't got a lot of NARS products. I used to buy more than I do nowadays. I've always used the multiples, although when I looked in my makeup drawer, I've in fact only got one left currently in the famous Orgasm. I've had the lipsticks occasionally, especially in the crayon form. I haven't tried their foundations. I've had eyeshadows in the past. I've never been really as in love with this range as a lot of people are. The quality is good. I'm not a great fan of the standard packaging. Here's the multiple I was talking about. Because although I kind of like sleek black and white, I find the kind of slightly rubberized texture of the black packaging really ages badly. So if you carry these things around in your handbag or just kind of rolling around in the makeup drawers, they become really scruffy and almost a bit sticky quite quickly, which I know doesn't affect the product. It might seem a silly reason for not loving the line, but I do think with premium products, one is partly buying into the design, and if something begins to look tacky and cheap quickly when it isn't in fact cheap, then I'm not a great fan. But the products have been fine. I love the Orgasm colour, which everyone raves about. It is a classic. It does suit certainly fair-skinned people very nicely indeed, but it's not now up there with my all-time favourite blush, which, as you know, is the Tom Ford Pink Sand for perfect colouring for fairer ladies. So that's a long introduction. I was quite taken with the Sarah Moon collection. Let's pause a minute to look at the beautiful packaging of this palette. I don't know a lot about Sarah Moon, but I do know that she's a photographer who kind of specialises in sepia tints, black and white, slightly out of focus, quite romantic images. And I think this palette really kind of captures that look. It's in, definite kind of sepia tones. It looks classy, it looks nice, and it's very substantial. There were a few items in the collection, but I went for this one because I was quite keen to try out the dual intensity, particularly the eyeshadows that I've read a lot of rave reviews about. Now, I have to say the colour palette wouldn't initially have been my choice. I don't use black very often, as you know, and I'm not a great grey smoky lover, so immediately there are certainly those two, kind of those three, that I know I'm not going to use a lot, although the silver one looks quite nice. However, I do use taupes and creams and golds a lot, so there was that, and you're getting a kind of, well, that's looking peachier and lighter. It's a bit more tan in real life, and this is a bit more vibrant pink in real life. So a blush, a kind of bronzer, and a highlighter. Now, what do I think of the products? I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed with them. I guess it's to do with the title, Dual Intensity. If I swatch, giving a really good hard rub there, you can see this comes off. This is the taupe, not particularly intense, and that's with a really good swipe and a rub dry. And I find actually on a brush, unless I use a really, really dense brush, and I tend to use much softer brushes for my eye makeup, then it's quite difficult to get the colour without, really building up. So there's the lighter ones, and you can see very light indeed. Even the black I mean, it is pigmented, but I suppose a bit chalky to use for me. They're actually showing up quite nicely. But that's, really kind of pressing the fingers in. And as I say, with a brush, it's harder. Having said that, they are, particularly these darker colours, which I wouldn't generally use a lot, much easier to work with because they're less intensely pigmented. So it takes me longer to do my eye makeup, but I can definitely use these colours. The last I haven't found is particularly brilliant. I definitely have to use a primer or a cream underneath, and they do tend to crease really within about 3 to 4 hours, which I don't think is brilliant for something that costs this much. Now, you are supposed to use these wet or dry, which I guess is what the dual bit is about, if I just wet a brush a little bit. And undoubtedly, they are a bit more intense if you use wet, but there isn't a lot in it. And I'm not a great one for using shadows wet. Occasionally I'll wet to tight line if I want to use a shadow rather than a pen or a pencil, but I don't do that a lot. It just seems to me to add an unnecessary level of complication to my makeup, which, I want to get over with quite quickly. But I mean, undoubtedly they are a bit more intense used wet, which shouldn't be surprising. I do think they last a bit longer wet. I've only really done a complete kind of eye makeup using wet, I'm going to say once. I might have done it twice. My impression was that the shadow did last a lot better when it was applied wet, for what it's worth. But, that kind of brought it to acceptable levels. Same problems really with the blush. I was very excited about this Pretty Pink, and it is a very pretty shade. But it just doesn't last very well. I will say the bronzer is one I could use as fair-skinned, and the highlighter is very pretty, but again needs a firm hand to get any effect. But my issue really with them, I suppose, is the last, or lack of it, that I've found for the price of the product. So I'm kind of, on the fence with this palette. I don't regret buying it because I did want to try out the dual intensity. I have found I can do quite nice looks with it, but I've been disappointed with how the products last on the skin, particularly I have to say, well, both really, the blush and the eyes. I love the design of this. It's got a beautiful clear mirror. It's a nice palette to take away with you, nice and kind of waterproof in the wash bag. I love the lid, but I suppose what I can say is I wouldn't be rushing to buy any more dual intensity products from Nars. So in that sense, it's a bit of a fail. So those are my thoughts on the Nars Dual Intensity Sarah Moon. I think there were lip palettes as well, and I know people rave about the lip products. It's a long time since I've bought one. I wonder how they last, in comparison to other high-range lipsticks, because obviously I wasn't too impressed with this one on that score. But if any of you have tried the other dual intensity products, or maybe, not in this special edition, but the individual or duo pans, because I do find quite often products that are done in these special palettes somehow don't work out the same as the ordinary permanent range. And so maybe this wasn't a good example of this particular formulation. So I'd be interested to know what other people's experiences are. So until next time, and getting into Advent and my hopefully daily, very short Advent reveals, I will see you again soon. Bye for now.